Hey, what's up, everybody? Mark Price here at devslopes.com, in case you forgot. And today, we are going to learn how to work with lists and arrays, which are basically a collection of data, a linear collection of data, more or less. And let's go ahead and go into our assets folder here. Just have any project open, okay? We're going to create a new C# script, and we're going to call this list time baby. Woohoo. Double click it. Alright, here's our code. Now, why do we need to work with lists? Okay, what's the point? What's the point of an array? Why would we ever need to do anything like that? You probably don't even know what I'm talking about, which is okay. So let's say that we are playing a multiplayer game and we have a list of user handles. Okay, this could be Call of Duty, this could be Clash of Clans, where there's a list of players in a clan, all listed out by their names. Okay, well, let's do things the hard way first, or maybe the way that we might initially think on how to do it. So we know that there's currently right now 10 players in the game. Okay, so let's go ahead and give them all names. So we can say string, or say player 1 equals, you know, Johnny Killer 25. String player 2 equals Bam Bam Bunny Lover 18, because all the other numbers were taken. Okay, string player 3. Of course, we need DevSlopes in here because he's gonna whomping everybody. String player 4 is Pony Lover Brony. He loves My Little Pony. Fluttershy, Pinkie Pie, Rainbow Dash, Twilight Sparkle, Rarity. Pretty good, huh? I don't watch My Little Pony or anything. Okay, so we've got 4 players here, right? Are you already see a problem here? Do we know how many players are going to be in a clan or in a game before it starts? Does the game know? No, there's no way of knowing. Okay, so like, yeah, this is kind of rough here. Like, so what if the game's starting and we want to say welcome all the players? Well, that's what we're gonna have to do. We're gonna have to say, you know, debug.log. I'm gonna say welcome plus player 1. Okay, and we do it again. Debug.log. Welcome player 2. You know, it's funny. I teach people how to code on many different platforms, from Android to iOS, and people always get upset because I teach using video game examples. They're like, this doesn't even apply. I want to build a banking app. And it's just funny because now I'm teaching how to code with game stuff, and it's like so easy. I could do this stuff on the fly, no sweat. So you guys are lucky. You're getting my best brain power here. So welcome plus player 3. You're like, I get the idea, Mark. Just stop. Well, no, you don't get the idea. I'm gonna make sure it's stuck in your head here. Welcome plus player 4. Okay, so save this here. Let's go back into Unity. Okay, let's go ahead and just play the game. Oh, you know it's not going to happen. We need to put it on the main camera here. I'm going to drag this list time baby onto the main camera. In fact, I'm going to remove from my other project here. I'm going to remove the conditional script. This little component and remove component is now gone. Play the game. Welcome Johnny Killer 25, Bam Bam Bunny Lover 18, DevSlopes, and Pony Lover. Okay, so we just printed the 4 players. Now, this violates a very important principle called dry, and that is don't repeat yourself. If you're ever repeating yourself in code, you are writing bad code. Now, I know you may be a new programmer. It's okay to copy and paste. If you cannot figure out any other way to write your code, you better make sure you copy and paste. Don't stop coding until you can figure something better out. I'm just saying, I want you to know right now, if you're writing code, the same code over and over, you're not doing it the best way possible. You're not using the tools that are at your disposal. And so what I want you to know is just know it's called a code smell. You're going to smell that it's wrong, and I want you to know that it's wrong until you figure out a better way to do it. And we'll teach you throughout this course, but it's important to know. So there definitely is a better way to do this, for sure. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to comment this out with Command and Control, and then the / button. It comments these lines out so the compiler does not read them. I'm going to comment these out as well. there's a better way, and that is using arrays. Okay, we can create an array of multiple types, of any type really, like so. This particular array is going to be a string, not an integer, and then we're going to do the opening square bracket and closing square bracket, and we're going to call this players. Okay, so we now have an array of players, but up to this point we actually can't use this array because it has not been initialized. Okay, if we try and use this right here, okay, let's see what's going to happen. Let's see if we try and grab something out of this array that's empty. I just want you to see. Let's say debug.log, and we're going to say player 1. We're going to add, and then we're going to grab the first item out of this array, which is slot 0. We'll talk about that in a minute. So we're trying to grab something out of this array, and I want to see what's going to happen. Go over here to Unity. I clear it. I click play. Null reference exception. What? My game just crashed. By the way, you just got a crash in your game. So rule number 1. We're not doing a list of rules, but it just sounded good. Don't ever, ever, ever try and access an array or an object that has not been initialized yet. Object reference not set to an instance of an object. This is the error you're going to see. So a point is, if you ever see this error in Unity 3D, object reference not set to an instance of an object, it likely means that you tried to access something in your code that had not been initialized yet. Okay? Very important. Jot that down. Okay, back to the code. So we need to first initialize this array. And there's multiple ways of doing this, actually, quite a few. First things first is 1, 2, 3, 4. We know we have 4 players, right? So one way to initialize this array is to say equals new. Okay, we're going to create a new. Imagine that you've got a car factory, okay, that makes cars, and the boss is like, okay, it's time to make a new vehicle. That's what you're doing here. Okay, you're taking the blueprint, which is this array, and you're making the new vehicle. You got to use the new keyword. That's all it means. Okay, create a new string. And we need to say how many elements we want. We want 4. Okay, an array in C# always must have a size. Always, always, always. It cannot grow. It cannot shrink. It can be empty. But what's happening here is when I say 4, it is now reserving 4 slots in memory. So a couple more hints and tips. If you know how many items are going to be in your array, don't ever put like a huge number, okay? Because it's going to reserve all that space in memory, and the rest of your game can access it, and your game could possibly run slow, especially on mobile, okay? So be very careful in how many elements you put in an array. Only use what you need, okay? So string players equals new string of 4. Now what I can do, okay, is I can start putting things in here. But let's just go ahead and run it and see if anything changes at all. So back to the code. Let's clear. I've saved that code, by the way, and I run it. Okay, player 1, it's empty. Now, it didn't crash this time, and it didn't crash because we have the space for it. We've reserved those slots. Okay, it's similar to like if you went and reserved, 4 seats at a movie theater, for the upcoming, Star Wars Rogue One. It's upcoming at least right now, very soon. It's going to be really exciting. And you've reserved 4 seats, but then, nobody showed up. The seats are still there. The theater's not going to burn down, but you lost. Nothing's there. So what we want to do is we want to assign those values, which is fairly simple to do. All we need to do is say players, square bracket, closing square bracket, players 0 equals, and then we're going to say Johnny Killer 25. This is interesting. So player 0. So with an array, to access an element in an array, you put the square braces, or square brackets, braces, brackets, brackets, square brackets, on the right side of it, and you say, I want whatever number element it is. Well, arrays always start at 0. There's another programming thing that you gotta get in your head right now. Is arrays always start at 0. Lists always start at 0. They never, ever, 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 ever start at 1. They always start at 0. Okay? So we say we want the first element, and then we want to put something inside of it. Okay? And then we can go like this. Players 1 equals bam, bam, bunny lover. Let's say bunny hugger. We already have the word lover in the other one. Bunny hugger 18. Players 2 equals Dev Slopes, of course, the king of the match. Players 3 equals pony lover. Okay. Notice how 1, 2, 3, 4. There's still 4 elements. They just start at 0. Now let's see what happens when I run this print statement. I've saved it. It's empty now, but when I play it again this time, ta-da, Johnny Killer 25. Okay? So what we've done is we've now assigned elements into this array. Now, you're probably thinking, well, I don't understand. You know, this is, I don't understand the value of doing this here. We could have just done this here. Well, maybe you're right. Maybe there is no value just yet. But what we've just done is we've put these things in a collection. Okay, we put these things in a collection that we can now have stored. Okay, so if we ever wanted to have, like, say, another class, okay, you'll learn about that later. If you want to have another class where maybe you have the game manager that's holding a list of players, but all of a sudden the network manager needed the list of players, you could just pass in this one object, this one variable, instead of having to say player 1, player 2, player 3, up to 10,000, etc., 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 right? It'd be a big pain. So there is some immediate value there already. And there's more ways to do this than one. We've just assigned them like so. And of course, we can keep changing this out. I could have done this. Players 0 equals, let's say, Suzanne Junk. She's got a weird name. I know. I didn't make it up. It's some player online. Okay. So then we're printing player 1 after, right? So player 1 right here was Johnny. Player down here is Suzanne Junk. And if we play, what's it going to print? It's printing Suzanne Junk this time. Why? Because we replaced what was inside of this element here, which is also pretty cool. But I don't want to do that. I'm kicking her out of the game. She's a camper. Nobody likes campers. Actually, that's a big gripe I have. Did any of you play Call of Duty in these games? Like, they have removed camping from all the games. When I used to play first-person shooters like Counter-Strike, I was like, I've been playing Counter-Strike since like beta 3. Okay, that was the coolest part of the game. You can get your sniper rifle, find a good camping spot, and shoot people. Call of Duty is like, oh, we don't want that. Why? I don't know why. Bring it back. One of you guys should make a game that lets camping come back and make it really big, and I will buy it. Okay, so that's one way of initializing an array. There's other ways. Let's comment this out. Okay, string players equals new string. Okay, that was one way. Let's do the same thing here. So we're going to say string players, but this time what we're going to do is we're going to just initialize it here right off the bat with a literal initialization. This is just called an initializer. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to say Johnny Killer 25, comma, Bam Bam Bunny Hugger 18. And then we're going to say Dev Slopes. We're going to say Pony Lover. And then ending curly brace, semicolon. So this is called an initializer. And it's doing the same thing as before. It's still giving us 4 elements. It's not giving us more than that. It's only giving us 4. But in this case, we can initialize it here right off the bat, which I think is nice because it saves a little more space. Since in our case, we've decided our game's only going to have 4 players. Therefore, this array has 4. And so this is a nice way of doing it too. Like when the game first loads, you can just put them right in here. You got all your players and you're ready to go. Pretty cool, right? So let's actually do something fun. You want to do something fun? You're like, yeah, that's why I bought this course. Okay. Well, what I want to do is I want to actually, in Unity, put our array to use. Actually make things appear on the screen. Ooh. So let's go ahead and do that now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all this stuff. Let's just clear it out. Okay. If you want all this, you can come back. You can write your own code and save it. Okay, clear it all out. So what I want to do is using an array, I want to have a bunch of cubes appear on the screen in the game using an array. And we're only going to write a limited amount of code. So we're not going to say create a cube, create a cube, create a cube. We're not going to do it manually. We're going to use some really cool logic to do it. And you're going to learn a little bit about a loop. We'll cover that more in a little bit, but this is going to be fun. So what I want you to do is create a game object. Okay, a game object is just an object that is in the Unity 3D, the world of Unity 3D. It's just an object that's living in the game. We're going to make it into an array. Remember, I said an array can be of any type. So in this case, it's not an integer, it's not a string, it's a game object. And we're going to call this cubes equals new game object, semicolon. Of course, it's going to yell at us because it needs the number. And we're going to say 5. We want 5 cubes on the screen. Okay? Pretty cool, right? I think it's pretty cool. What we're going to do is we're going to go over here to our game in Unity 3D and click the scene. What I want to do is here over on the right hand side, I want to right click and go to create 3D object cube. Save it, and click the inspector. Just make sure everything's 0 in position and rotation. That's all perfect. So there's our cube, and it's looking great. Now what I want to do is I just want to take that cube and drag it over here. Okay, dragging it over here into the assets folder. We've just turned it into a prefab. What I want to do now is I want to delete this cube from the game scene because we've now stored it down here. Now back in our code, I'm going to create a public field here, and we're going to call this cube. Oh, we're going to call this game object, and we're going to call this cube prefab. Okay, cube prefab. And the reason why we're making it public is so it can be accessible from our script. So if I click our main camera where our script is, there is now something here called cube prefab. Oh, with Unity you can drag and drop things in. So what I want to do is take this cube and just drag it in. Pretty cool, right? I think it's cool. Go back to the code. So we've got our cube. It's been dragged in there. And what I want to do is at the start, I want to go through the entire array of cubes. I want to create 5 cubes, okay? And I want to store them in this array. That's what we want to do. You ready for that? Let's do it. When we're working with an array, you usually want to work with a loop of some kind. They go hand in hand. And a loop will loop through an array or a series of items based on some condition. So let's do that now. Let's create our very own loop. So what I want to do is I want to loop through 5 times and create 5 cubes. What I'm trying to show you is the value of working with a list. If we write smart code, we don't have to keep copying and pasting and copying and pasting, okay? So just follow along. It won't make sense at first. We're going to say for. We're going to say int. So for int I equals, and we're going to say 0. And why I is less than cubes dot length I plus plus. If this looks like Chinese to you, it's okay. It does take some time to understand this. But basically what we're saying is let's create a variable, an integer variable, and I'm just calling it I. I could have called it anything. I could have called it baloney, okay? I equals 0, so it's going to initialize it to 0, this variable here, and then this is the condition. We've learned about conditions already. While I is less than, so while 0 is less than cubes.length, well, length is a property, a variable on our array. Any array, you can get the length of it, okay? And so in our case, the length of this is going to be 5. So while 0 is less than 5, okay, run this code in here, okay? Run this code. And after the code runs, then it's going to increase I by 1. So it's going to say I equals I plus 1. It could also have been I equals I plus 1. Okay, but I think I plus plus is a lot easier to read. Okay, so create a variable, run a condition infinite amount of times until, or run this code infinite amount of times until this condition is met. Okay, and then iterate at the end of the loop iteration, run this code here. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a cube and stick it in this array. That's pretty much what we're going to do. So let's go ahead and say instantiate. Okay, and we're going to pass in the cube, the cube prefab. Sorry, cube prefab, like so. All right. Then what I want to do is I actually want to put it in the array. So the instantiate keyword is with Unity. And basically, it creates a prefab object. So if over here in Unity, and you're going to learn more about this. We're just having a little bit of fun here, showing you real use cases. So over here in Unity, this cube here, it does not exist in our scene yet. But when I call instantiate, it's going to grab this because we dragged it into the script, and it's going to instantiate it here in our scene. Okay. Let's go back over here to our code. Instantiate the cube prefab. In fact, what I probably want to do is store that in a variable. So we're going to say game object. We're just going to call this cube equals instantiate cube prefab. And then what I want to do is I just want to store it in the array. We're going to say cubes I equals cube. Is that confusing? Cubes I equals cube. What is going on here? 4 words inside. Well, all we're doing here is we're storing something in this array. Remember before how we stored, we rewrote the player's name into the array? That's what we're doing here. We're saying cubes I. Well, I is an integer, okay? remember, you access an element of an array from an integer. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, inside of this cubes list, let's set the very first element, which is 0 in this case, to this cube we just created. Then when it gets here, after this is run, this is going to be 1, so I is going to be equal to 1. So then we're going to stick the number 1 in there, and it's going to store the second cube that we just created in number 1. This code's going to keep getting repeated and repeated and repeated, and we're just going to store a new value in each element of the array, which is why we make the array less than the cubes.length. Why didn't we make it equal to 5? There's 5 objects. Why didn't we say, well, I is equal to 5? Well, because arrays start at 0. So if you went up all the way to 5, if we said less than or equal to, when it gets to 5, it would crash because there's no 5th element. No 5th element. Good movie, by the way. They should make a second one. So, yeah, so I is equal to 0. We store the cube in here. Then it runs this code again. Now I is equal to 2 because we added to it. And then we're sticking another cube in there. Now let's go ahead and run it and see what happens. Who knows what's going to happen? Let's see. Maybe it'll crash. Well, there's a cube. Look, there's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if I move these, brink, brink, there's multiple cubes. How cool is that? Now, let's be a little more smart about this. Let's say cube.transform.position equals new vector 3. So we're using the new keyword here again, just like we did here on the array. And a vector 3, you don't have to worry about this now. You're going to learn more about it later. A vector 3 stores x, y, and z coordinates. And this is how you move things around. So a new vector 3. And what do we want to do? Well, we want to move it along the x-axis. So what we're going to do is we're going to just make this vector 3 equal to I, okay, which is this one right here. Okay, so vector 3I, and then the y position, I don't even want to care about really right now. We just want to leave it the same. So we're just going to say cube.transform.position.y. We're going to leave it the same. Okay. So what's happening here? And we didn't set the z because we didn't need to. We'll just leave it the same. So what we're doing now is we're saying we want to move the position of the cube. Okay, and you do that in Unity by grabbing the transform object of a game object, position, and a position takes a vector 3, and we're saying I. Why did we say I here? Does anyone know why? Gerald, would you explain to the class? What Gerald said is, yeah, we used I because right here it's at 0, so we know 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I'm thinking what I want to do is over here in the game, when we have this cube here, see how I just dragged the cube on, by the way. If I click the inspector, click the cube, if I say position x equals 1, it's going to move it. If I say position x equals 2, it's going to move it. If I say position x is 3, it's going to move it. Oh, so I want to base the position on the number of cubes, which is pretty cool. We'll see if it works. I don't know if it will. We'll see. Click play. Brink. Ooh, that's pretty cool. So now we got our cube showing over here. This is getting kind of fun, right? Are you starting to think of some games you can make like this? Actually, one of my very first Unity games that I made on my own was a brick breaker. It was Super Mario themed, where like there was a little mushroom bouncing up the walls and breaking bricks, and I did all of the bricks using this type of code where I generated the whole grid based on an array, which I think was pretty cool. More thing just for fun, let's create a variable up here called spacer, and let's make that equal to, actually let's make it a float. Okay, and we're going to say float spacer equals 0.5f. And then what we're going to do here for the x position is we're just going to say I plus spacer, like so. You with me so far? Let's just add a little spacer so it looks a little better. Let's play. Make sure you've saved it. Oops. So we got a little bit of overlap here, right? I don't think our positioning is exactly what we need to do. So let's fix the code. I wrote bad code here. Let's fix it. Or no, I didn't. I just got a cube here. That's why. Let's try this again. There we go. So I don't think the spacer is really giving us enough space, to be honest. 1.5, 0.5, 1.5. Just not quite enough. I kind of want it to be like over here. Let's add a little more. Oh, and I got a little bit of bad logic here. We're just adding the spacer to I for the positioning, which is going to make it equal. What we actually wanted to do was say spacer times I, if this makes any sense. So basically, if the spacer, if we're in position 0, we don't need to add a spacer, okay? If we're in position 1, we want to take the spacer, which is 0.5, and multiply it by 1. So I plus spacer times, which is 0.5 times 1. And then do the same thing for 2, 3, and 4, which gives it equal multiplied distance. Okay, and this math takes time to figure out. It'll take time for you. I recommend that you read this code thoroughly until you understand it. Don't move on unless you understand everything that's going on here. So let's go ahead and run the code and see what's happening here. Beautiful, look at that. Press Q to pan around and Alt to rotate. So we got 5 cubes here, and this is all from an array. Can you imagine if we had to go over here in our code and be like, right, instantiate this 5 times, like, okay, do this, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, whatever. That would have been really annoying, okay? Yelled at us there. This is very elegant code, though. So we worked with a for loop here, okay? We iterated through an array with a for loop. Okay, remember, this is the initializer of the for loop. So when it gets to this for loop, it creates this variable. We initialize it to I. And then what we do is we have a condition. So this loop will only run if this condition is met. So if 0 in this case is less than cubes.length, which is 5, run the code. Okay, great. After the code runs, it then does this iterator here, whatever you want it to be. Okay, in our case, we just wanted to add it here. This is a very common way to write a loop. And then now it's 1. Is 1 still less than 5? Yes. Okay, now it runs, then it's 2, and then 3, and then 4. Now, is 4 less than cubes.length? 5? Yes, it is. Okay, so then it runs the code, and then I++. Now it comes up here again. Now I is equal to 5. Is 5 less than cubes.length? No. 5 is equal to 5, but it's not less than 5. So it goes to false, and it never runs it again. And that's how you work with arrays and loops. Super powerful. You're going to use them all the time, and lots of fun stuff. What I would recommend that you do, just for fun, is at the end of this video, create a second array that has some different colors. Go look up on the Unity documentation, colors, Unity colors. Learn how to get the material and the renderer of a cube that we create here and change its color so all the cubes have different colors. That would be really fun, and it's only a couple lines of code to do that. So that's it for now. You've learned a lot. We had a little bit of fun. Let's just play it one more time, just for fun. Yay, look at that. All in code, programmatically. Pretty dang cool. So that's it for now. Mark Price at devslopes.com. Moving on and forward.